They thought they had you figured out. They sat in their comfortable circles comparing notes on you, rehearsing how they'd move, how they'd maneuver, how they'd position the pieces around you without you noticing the board was already set. They smiled at your face and drafted strategies behind your back, genuinely convinced that your calm was confusion, that your patience was ignorance, that your silence was the silence of someone who didn't understand what was happening. They were wrong so catastrophically that when the truth landed, it didn't just embarrass them, it restructured them completely. You had already mapped every exit before they drew the first line. You had already seen the ending before they rehearsed the opening. You already knew which doors they'd try to close, which pressure points they'd apply, which smiles were loaded and which silence was tactical. While they were building the trap, you were memorizing, and you said nothing because you didn't need to. Because people who have already won don't announce it in advance. That's not weakness. That's the most expensive kind of discipline a human being can possess. That thing they called naivety, that was intelligence so composed it didn't need to perform. That stillness they mistook for unawareness, that was someone watching from a frequency they didn't have the equipment to detect. The version of you they constructed in their heads, passive, unaware, easy to move, that version never existed. They built their entire strategy around a person who was never in the room. And you watched them execute their plan against a ghost while the real you stood quietly to the side, already finished with a conversation they hadn't started yet. Hold what you're feeling right now. That mix of recognition and something almost like grief. Grief for how long you stayed quiet while they miscalculated you. That feeling is real and it matters. Because there is something at the center of your story that most people never understand about themselves until it's almost too late. You are not who they decided you were. You never were. And what you are instead is something they don't have language for. And that specific absence of language is exactly what terrifies them every single time you walk into a room without announcing your arrival. They made a specific category of error. Not an accident, not poor judgment, but a systematic, deeply committed miscalculation rooted in one fatal assumption. They assumed that because you didn't react the way they expected, you weren't aware of what was happening. They confused your response style with your comprehension level. They looked at your composure and concluded it was emptiness, when composure of that depth only comes from someone who has already processed the entire situation and decided none of it deserves their energy yet. That's not absence, that's mastery. This is the mistake that defines a certain kind of person. They move through the world using a specific map, where confidence is loud, where power announces itself, where intelligence argues back immediately. When they encounter someone who doesn't match that map, their brain doesn't say, maybe my map is wrong. It says, this person is beneath the map. They didn't underestimate you by accident. They underestimated you because their model of the world had no room for someone like you. And a model with no room for you can never predict you, can never account for you, can never contain you. You've felt this your entire life in ways you couldn't always name. The job where they promoted the loudest voice in the room and handed you more work without the title. The relationship where they assumed your patience meant you had no limits, right until you did. The group where your name was something to be managed rather than respected. They got comfortable with your composure and stopped watching. And that was the last mistake they ever got to make with you. Because at some point, and you remember exactly when, something inside you shifted from open to observing, and you started seeing everything with brutal clarity. Real strategy doesn't announce itself at the dinner table. Real strategy doesn't send warning signals. Real strategy looks exactly like someone who has nothing to say, no agenda to push, no need to win the moment, until the moment that actually matters, and then it's already over before it began. You were never the naive one in that room. You were the one playing a longer game than anyone around you could see. measuring distances they hadn't even noticed existed, building toward an outcome they couldn't conceive because they were too busy performing confidence to develop actual awareness. Here's what they observed: someone who listened more than they spoke, who absorbed more than they deflected, who stayed in rooms they could have left, who smiled at things that deserved confrontation. They saw all of that, and they wrote a story about weakness. They filed you under manageable, under predictable, under safe to push. What they didn't see is what was happening beneath that surface. Every time you listened without reacting, you were collecting. Every inconsistency, every moment where their words and actions didn't align, filed, stored, cross-referenced without a single word spoken. Every time you absorbed rather than deflected, you were building a structural understanding of exactly who they are beneath the performance, beneath the charm, beneath the strategy. You weren't absorbing because you were passive. You were absorbing because you already understood something most people learn too late, that people show you exactly who they are when they feel unwatched. And you created those conditions perfectly, consistent. You cultivated an environment where their guard dropped completely. They performed for an audience that was actually a recorder. Every word, every move, permanently logged. Every room you stayed in that you could have left, you stayed because leaving too early costs information. You understood that exits are more powerful when chosen deliberately, when the timing is yours, when your departure restructures the entire situation. They thought you stayed because you needed to. You stayed because you were gathering the last pieces of something specific, when every variable was accounted for, when the picture was whole and undeniable. You moved, not with drama, not with announcement, with the quiet efficiency of someone who never needed their validation in the first place. This is the truth about people who have survived real psychological pressure and prolonged underestimations. They develop awareness that cannot be faked and cannot be taught in a comfortable life. They learn to read subtext beneath language, to sense a room shifting before any words change, to see the mechanism behind the gesture. You didn't develop that from a book. You paid for it with years of being the person everyone thought wasn't tracking, while you were tracking everything, cataloging everything, building a map so detailed it accounted for exits that hadn't been used yet. They thought your silence was absence. They thought when you didn't challenge them, you didn't see them. When you didn't argue back, you agreed. When you didn't defend yourself in the moment, you had no defense. They confused your silence with compliance, with confusion, with consent, and that confusion gave them confidence they'd never earned. That false confidence made them reckless, and recklessness is where people expose everything they've spent. Your silence didn't make you vulnerable. Your silence made them careless, and careless people reveal everything. Loud people, reactive people, people who process everything externally, they cannot comprehend a silence that isn't anxious. They have no framework for a pause that isn't filled with doubt. So when you go quiet, their nervous system fills the silence with the most flattering interpretation available. They have nothing to say. They're uncertain, and while they're busy reaching that wrong conclusion, you're already somewhere else entirely. Already holding the answer they don't know you have, already positioned for the moment that's still 4 conversations away from where they're currently standing. There is a specific kind of person who learns to use silence not from manipulation but from precision. They don't speak until speaking serves a purpose. They don't react until reaction is the right tool. They don't reveal until revealing produces the exact outcome they need. This is not coldness. This is someone who learned the hard way that words have weight, and weight placed in the wrong location causes collapse. So you became selective, measured, architectural about what you say and precisely when you say it. They called that naivety. It was a level of engineering they didn't have the sophistication to recognize in someone they'd already dismissed. The most dangerous moment for anyone who underestimates you is not when you confront them. It's when you go completely still, when you stop explaining, stop defending, stop engaging with their narrative entirely, that stillness should terrify them. It means you've finished your assessment, concluded your analysis, and determined the conversation, still running their argument, still arranging pieces on a board you've already left. That silence isn't confusion. That is the sound of someone who already knows exactly how this ends. Let's go to the moments they don't know about, the private calculus that happened inside you during every experience they thought was defeating you. Because people who absorb a disproportionate amount of difficulty without breaking are not just enduring, they are studying. Every experience of pressure, of betrayal, of underestimation was simultaneously a data set, a blueprint, a lesson in exactly how a specific kind of force operates against a specific kind of person. You weren't just surviving those situations, you were dissecting them in real time, extracting their structure, understanding their mechanics from the inside out. When they moved against you the first time, you didn't only feel it, you analyzed it. Where did it come from? What was the mechanism? What need was it serving? What did it expose about their fear? When they came back with the second move, you had already identified the pattern. When the third move came, you were already beyond it, already holding information about their strategy that they didn't know you had, because they assumed the first hit was a knockout and stopped watching for your response. They stopped watching because they thought you were down. You were down like a diver is down, moving faster beneath the surface than anything above it. Every person who miscalculated you gave you something irreplaceable. Every room that underestimated you gave you the gift of low expectations, and low expectations are the most efficient operating environment in existence. When nobody is tracking you, you move freely. When nobody thinks you're capable, they stop guarding against your capability. When they filed you under naive and non-threatening, you have full access to every corridor they stop protecting. They built their systems assuming you'd stay exactly where they placed you. You used their assumptions as a precise, detailed map of everything they'd left completely unguarded. The maps inside your head are layered. The surface layer is what you've observed and recorded. Beneath that is pattern recognition, where individual data points crystallize into structural understanding of how people and systems act. That three-layer system, built from pressure and time and a refusal to stop paying attention, is why you already had the exits mapped before they made their very first move. You weren't predicting the future. You were reading a pattern they didn't know was visible to anyone. When certain people call you naive, they are not making an observation. They are performing a reclassification. They are attempting to move you from person whose perception I need to account for into person whose perception I can safely ignore. It is a management tool. A way of saying, whatever you see, whatever you feel, whatever you know, I am pre-dismissing it by assigning it to inexperience, rather than engaging with it honestly. They don't actually believe you're naive. They are hoping, calculating, gambling, that you will believe it about yourself long enough for their strategy to work. Think about the specific moments when that word appeared near you. It appeared when you named something real. It appeared when you identified a dynamic they needed to remain unnamed. It appeared when your observation was accurate enough to be threatening. When your instinct cut too close to something they needed buried. When your clarity in a situation they expected to successfully muddy, that the muddy water simply wasn't working. You're so naive, is what people say when they've tried to obscure something and you're still seeing it clearly anyway. It is not a description of your perception. It is a panicked reaction to its uncomfortable accuracy. The people who called you naive were always the ones who needed you to doubt yourself, not the ones who genuinely cared about you, not the ones who wanted you to grow and see more clearly. Investment, your idealism, any frame that could make your accurate observations seem like insufficient data rather than the result of paying very careful and sustained attention to everything happening around you. You did something remarkable with all of that. You held on to your perception anyway, not loudly, not defiantly, not with performance that would have made them dismiss you as reactive. You held it quietly, internally, with the steady grip of someone who knows that truth doesn't require an audience to remain true. You didn't need their validation of what you saw. You kept seeing it. Every time they called you naive, and you nodded and went quiet and kept watching. That was not submission. That was the most sophisticated move available on that particular board at that particular moment in time. There is a specific moment, and every person who has been systematically underestimated knows this moment, where the energy in the room changes without anyone saying anything, where you've made a move, or declined to make a move, or simply chosen not to be where they expected you to be. And the realization lands on the others. The map they were using was wrong, that the person they thought they were managing had been completely ungovernable the entire time they thought they held the controls. Watch what happens to people who had you figured out when that moment arrives. The confidence borrowed from your assumed compliance suddenly has no foundation. The moves they prepared become useless, all designed for someone who needed validation, who could be managed through approval or disapproval, who could be redirected through social pressure. And you don't need any of those things. You never did. And now that's visible. And that visibility, the fact that never contained, never in the position they assumed, costs them everything. They will try to reframe in that moment. They will construct a new narrative that explains what just happened while preserving their sense of control. I always knew you were capable. I was testing you. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Watch for it. It's not a compliment. It's a recalibration attempt. Someone trying to retroactively position themselves as the author of your move rather than the person it was made against. Don't engage with it. Don't correct it. Don't offer any reaction that confirms the narrative still matters to you, because you stopped caring about their narrative long before they stopped actively writing it. The quiet power of the moment where they finally realize is that you don't need to do anything with it. You don't need them to acknowledge it, witness it, or document it publicly. You already experienced the only confirmation that matters, the internal one, the private one, the one that happened long before this moment. Everything they'd assumed about you, and said quietly to nobody but yourself, I already know how this ends. Everything after that moment was simply the world catching up to what you had already fully, completely understood. What made you this way was not free. The ability to read rooms before entering them, to track exits automatically, to hold the long view while everyone around you reacts to the immediate. That skill set was purchased at a price that wasn't voluntary and wasn't small. You didn't choose to develop hyper-awareness. It was built into you by repeated exposure to situations where missing a signal, the energy shift meant getting caught in something you could have avoided, where trusting the wrong version of events cost you in ways you can still feel in specific quiet moments. There is grief inside this capability that rarely gets acknowledged honestly. The grief of being someone who couldn't simply trust rooms, couldn't take words at face value, couldn't walk into a situation without part of your mind immediately beginning its structural analysis. The grief of knowing, in the moment when you wanted to be suspicious, but because experience had taught you with painful consistency that surfaces are always the least accurate version of what is actually operating beneath them at any given moment. You paid for your map with your most unguarded moments. You paid for it with the times you trusted completely and were shown exactly what that trust cost. You paid with years of being the person in the room who felt more than they showed, who understood more than they were given credit for, who kept the score quietly while everyone debated whether a game was even being played. That cost is real. The fact that it produced something extraordinary doesn't make the price retroactively small or painless. You are allowed to acknowledge that both things are true at exactly the same time without contradiction. Something inside you looked at all of that pressure and weight and mise-evaluation and said, this becomes fuel, or it becomes a grave. And you chose fuel, not with a declaration, not with a cinematic moment of resolve, but in thousands of tiny private choices to keep moving, pressure into pattern recognition, loss into a literacy about how the world actually operates. That is the engine of absolutely everything you have become and everything you are still becoming. They had a version of you they needed to maintain, not the you who existed, but the you who was useful to their story. The naive one, the one still learning, the one who needed guidance, management, direction, the one who would defer to their experience, accept their framing as more valid than your own because they'd been around longer or held a title the room was trained to respect. They needed that version of you to be real because it made sense of their position relative to yours. If you're still figuring it out, they have something. What nobody tells you about outgrowing the story someone needs you to live inside is that the outgrowing itself gets interpreted as aggression. When you stop needing their guidance, they don't experience that as your growth, they experience it as your betrayal. When you stop deferring to their version of events, they don't process it as developing clarity, they process it as you becoming difficult. When you demonstrate capability they said you didn't have, when you navigate situations they implied were beyond you, that's not celebrated, that's threatening. Because your capability exposes everything they told you about yourself as wrong. The undermining, the subtle repositioning, the labels, naive, too sensitive, too idealistic, not ready, none of that was ever really about you. It was about them needing to stay upstream of you, and the flow of became accurate, and you started trusting your own reading of the room over theirs. That moment ended something they depended on structurally, and they called that naivety, when the precise and accurate word for it was liberation. You don't need them to recategorize you. You don't need them to update their file, revise their assessment, issue a corrected version of the judgment they've been circulating. You never needed their version of you to be accurate for you to know who you are. You've always had access to the information they lacked. You were always on the inside of your own experience, always holding the primary source data about your own perception and capability. Their map of you was always a copy made from a distance by someone who never had clearance to access the original. You have been working from the original this entire time. You are at the edge of a specific threshold. Behind you is the entire architecture of who they decided you were. All the projections, the labels, the managed expectations, the curated limitations, all of that is behind you now. You carry the knowledge of it, the shaped awareness it built, the map it forced you to draw, but you are no longer inside it. You have stepped out of their frame, and the question at the edge of this threshold isn't what they'll do next. The question is what you'll do with the full, unconstrained, unmanaged operation of everything you have spent years quietly building inside yourself. People who have spent years running sophisticated internal processes while appearing to do nothing have accumulated a readiness that has nowhere to go but forward. All that observation, all that pattern recognition, all that precision about what actually moves things versus what just makes noise, all of it was preparation for a version of you that didn't need to be hidden, didn't need to operate under the cover of their low expectations. You are more prepared than people who have been performing capability for years. They were decorating the display case. You were building the actual thing, in private, without applause, without a single person in the room who understood what you were constructing. What comes next requires resisting one specific temptation, the temptation to prove it to them, to make sure the people who called you naive are watching when the evidence arrives. That impulse is understandable, and it is also the one trap that reduces what you've built into something reactive, something still organized around their judgment instead of your direction. You don't need them to see it. The map you drew isn't for them. The exits you mapped aren't about escape from them. They are about the freedom to move toward what you are actually, finally, deliberately and completely building for yourself and no one else. Move the way you've always actually moved. Not loudly, not performatively, not with announcement that gives people time to prepare their response. Move with the same quiet precision that had them convinced you weren't moving at all. Let the outcomes speak when they land. Let the results accumulate without commentary. Let your presence in rooms they never expected you to reach be its own complete statement. No footnote required, no explanation offered, no acknowledgement sought from people whose opinion you outgrew before they even noticed you were leaving. You already know what you know. You already see what you see. They called you naive. They built entire strategies around that single word. They got comfortable in that assumption, got reckless in that comfort, got completely exposed in that recklessness, and you said nothing because you had already mapped every exit before they started. And now you know, permanently, irrevocably, with the kind of certainty that doesn't need to be performed for anyone, that was never naivety. That was the most devastating, most precise, most completely invisible move on the entire board. Subscribe, because the next one goes somewhere they really didn't expect you to reach.